I am Amanda Weidman, and my out-of-body experience took place in 2017. An accident happened on a twisty mountain road when my then-partner was driving our vehicle. The path was narrow since the mountainside dropped sharply on one side and rose quickly on the other. There was a concrete railing. As another vehicle approached us from behind, it abruptly crossed the center line and entered our lane. There was no escape route. A slight deviation would have brought us into touch with the mountain, and the gravel shoulder was quite narrow. While swerving, we managed to evade the oncoming automobile, but the combination of our speed and the uneven gravel shoulder led us to lose control. We crashed into the car following the one coming up behind us not long after we started to spin out of control. Prior to the descent, this impact inverted our vehicle, and we came to a stop on the concrete guardrail. As soon as we came to, we opened our eyes and saw a huge forest that had been flipped upside down. Since I had been a paramedic in the area for around 13 years, I knew that cars colliding and going over the edge was common. Every month or so, it would happen, and we would often joke about how paramedics likely got their start on that road. The vehicles would careen off the edge, and you'd never see them again. In that split second, I felt like I was about to pass away. My body sank into a state of profound relaxation as I shut my eyes and released any tension. Nothing was explained to me as to what happened next. I have no idea how or why things moved along at such a breakneck pace. Nevertheless, my reaction was that way. Looking back, I recall reading that the golden rule is to strive to release all attachments and worries before dying. I let it go just like that. I leaned back in my seat as if I were about to die on this planet as the plane took off. What happened was just astounding. I was immediately struck by a limitless, airy, pillowy blackness. Instead of being terrifying, it seemed like you were in a never-ending cave. I quickly realized that I was completely irrelevant. I've never felt that way before since I've always had a body. Upon first appearance, I was keenly aware that adults perpetually tote about 100, 200, or 300 pounds. As you become accustomed to something, you may find that you unconsciously increase it. Being free to use all of my awareness and observation without that constraint was an incredible feeling. Upon my arrival, I was unable to perceive anything because I was blind. While my physical eyes failed to detect anything, I experienced a level of heightened alertness and awareness that I had never experienced before in my entire human existence. It felt as if the degree of consciousness was amplified, In your sobriety, you can have faith in your acute perception. As if you'd all of a sudden started to pay attention to yourself. Imagine this, you and your friends had a wild night of drinking and partying, and then you feel more energized after a cup of coffee in the morning. For me, Earth was that foggy night after a few drinks. Wow, this is authentic, I thought to myself. The passage of time is something I cannot fathom. Countless seconds passed on Earth, but when you transcend your physical form, the fabric of time itself shifts. In what feels like an eternity, there is still a lot to see, experience, or understand, even when only seconds have passed on Earth. As I adjusted to being outside of my body, I saw that it wasn't heavy and that I was without my senses. I had an overpowering sensation of familiarity. This place made me feel at ease and at home. Even in the most paradisal of times, there is always the possibility that something bad may happen. But that was clearly not the case here. In every aspect, that feeling was fantastic. It was completely new to me. Things started to happen, although I don't remember every detail because this isn't a linear timeline. I felt a presence. The unity of all things, God, and divinity are terms that have been used to describe this presence. Despite thinking, that's interesting. Whenever I heard those words, I was never able to put them into context or comprehend their meaning. Suddenly, everything became quite obvious. It seemed like there were billions of beings in the area. It seemed as if a great chorus of health and wellness spirits had gathered, maybe my ancestors, angels, or even the spirits of the land and its creatures. But I couldn't discern who they were. It seemed like everything in the cosmos was falling into place. As if it were God, this presence seemed to bring everything together. The realization that I had passed this exact area countless times previously finally clicked. The very thought of that makes me shiver. In my experience, that presence was limitless, perfect, loving, and non-judgmental. The next thing I remembered was hearing something. It started out quietly and got louder over time. I observed the bending, crushing, and flattening of metal while I heard cries. My camping partner and I had just scattered our cast iron cookware and camping gear along the side of the road, and it was quite a scene. A person could hardly hear it. I regained consciousness and found myself inverted in my body as my partner let out a piercing scream. All he was doing was screaming, and he never left his body. The sound of people expressing their disgust at witnessing a dead person could be heard coming from the area around the car. "Oh, come on. I believe you should go have a look instead. Oh, come on." A lot of people thought we were dead. When someone showed up with a crowbar, we were eventually freed from the car. I was incredibly aroused. The ache in my shoulder didn't seem significant. My heart swelled with joy. People came running over to check on me as I sat on the concrete railing and stared at the trees. Several individuals hurried over to assist my companion, who was shouting as soon as I heard her. Looking back on my recent trip home, I can say that I felt great. It's great where we go to transition between lives. I just got back from there. Nothing would stop me from saying I would be there or I would come back here again in another body, even after I passed away. Authentic errors do not transpire. Regardless of the situation, our true identity is always maintained by our consciousness and soul, whether they are physically present or not. My heart was racing with joy. We visited the physician. Though we weren't sick, my girlfriend did have a concussion, and I had little whiplash in my shoulder. I remained in this state of pure bliss following the accident. It took me 4 months off work to be sure my shoulder was okay to lift patients again. I was completely unconcerned right then. Even though I've never thought of myself as someone who was afraid of the dark, I found that talking about death brought a newfound sense of comfort and assurance. At first, I didn't notice that my inner condition was changing. Everything else in life had lost its significance for me. I had faith that things would work out in the end, regardless of the situation. In the year following the catastrophe, I experienced several changes. I overcame the reality that few people could connect to my predicament by being careful about who I spoke to. I felt obligated to lend a hand at a hospice to individuals who were nearing the end of their life. Those who are getting close to the end of their lives often have hallucinations and trips to the hereafter. I found that I could identify with what they were saying, and hearing about their experiences reinforced my own confidence in the existence of a greater power. Things began to appeal to me in different ways. I never had much of an interest in things like competing, comparing myself to others, or accumulating material belongings. Things that were formerly thought to be significant are today wholly unimportant. That was the year my relationship ended. Our incompatibility became apparent after 13 years of dating. When I sold the house, I also gave up most of its belongings. I lived out of my RV for the next 2 years, visiting friends and family across the country and going on countless camping excursions. Considering how fast-paced life is in the West, I made an effort to focus on myself. I longed for a method to connect with my spiritual side through activities like praying, wandering among the trees, and contemplation while spending time in nature. The interaction was brief, but it left a lasting impression on me. To tell you the truth, I was never again the same. I have kept up my nomadic lifestyle for the last 5 years by living out of a suitcase and moving from place to place. I am quite good at having everything I need on hand. While I'm not at work, I'm developing an online trauma coaching business and volunteering. Even though I am constantly learning and developing, the lessons I learned about surrendering control, not being excessively connected to worldly stuff, and accepting defeat in the face of imminent disaster are ever present. I am relieved that my needs have been met. I will never forget that life-altering, once-in-a-lifetime experience.